We now head over to Project Anvil base. Currently, the Muller twins were just going over the DNA samples and trying to figure out why Tara and Oliver were so different from Mark. Mainly because they felt if they could understand Viltrumite DNA a bit better, they'd be able to understand what went wrong and why they weren't anything like Mark. While they had made imperfect clones in the past, this was different, though this was also a brand new set of DNA for them. Though it wasn't also a bad thing either. After all, it still seemed like they were on their side. Plus, it wasn't like they were weak either, it was just they were weaker than Mark. But considering everybody on the planet was weaker than Mark, not that bad to be 35% of Mark. Right now, their hypothesis was because they increased the human DNA too much. But they weren't sure that was the case either. Of course, they right now did have a bit more limited data. After all, they only had made 2 clones, and it was very unlikely they'd be able to make more. After all, Mark had seemed to have a change of heart when it came to making those clones. Now that he had seen they were going to be different people from himself. As one of the Muller twins said, "Honestly, I'm kinda happy about that. I was super worried that our alien protector was just gonna be cold like that. But turns out he's more human than we thought, which I think is kinda good." But the other Muller twin shrugged as he said, still, I wish we could experiment more, maybe in the future. That was when the door opened to the lab and somebody else entered. This person was Robot. As one of the Muller twins said, "Oh hey Robot, found your heart yet?" Robot looked over to the Muller twins for a second, just giving him a stare before deciding to say, "I have a task for both of you. 2 blood samples I require you to clone. That will be able to make me much more efficient and effective as a warrior. They shouldn't take you too long." And both of the Muller twins looked at each other for a second before they asked, we weren't warned of this ahead of time. Is this official GDA business, or is this just a you thing? Because if this is just a you thing, you're going to have to pay us something different. Like, we are all for wasting the government's resources, but if we don't get paid for this, yeah, we're not doing it. And Robot gave them a nod. He was hoping that maybe understanding that he would be able to become a better help to the planet would be enough, but he understood why it wouldn't. And Robot asked the Muller twins, "What do you require in order to make 2 clones?" And the Muller twins looked towards each other and thought about it for a couple of moments, thought what would be their price to make clones. And after discussing with each other what they wanted the price to be, they came up with an idea. As they said, "We have a total of 3 demands. Up first, can you upgrade our lounge area? There is a couple of things that could definitely be more comfortable for us. Next, we want a secondary lab, one where we can experiment on whatever we want to do. Now obviously we're not going to make anything that's an actual threat to the GDA, just a place we can do whatever we want. If you want to monitor us, Robot, you'll be able to." And Robot thought about that second demand for a moment before deciding why not. By this point, they had the Muller twins working for them for several months now. They knew they could trust them, or at least they had a little bit more trust in them now in comparison to before. But then came their 3rd demand. "We plan to make a 3rd clone of Mark, and we're going to try and get one that's more close to the power of Mark in comparison to the other 2. But we're definitely going to need Mark's approval in order to do it. So I need you to be on our side as well for support of this idea. While we could try this behind his back, I would rather not anger him with something like this. Besides, if this goes wrong, we're definitely going to need Mark to be prepared for it." This did make Robot tilt his head a little bit as he asked, "Why not just clone Anissa then? The reason Mark doesn't want to make any more clones is a personal reason. I don't know if he'd care as much if it was from Anissa though." And both the Muller twins laughed a little bit at that, as one of them then said, "You really are the Tin Man, aren't you? Even if we did get Mark's approval and this didn't anger him, which this most definitely would, cloning Anissa is a bad idea. While Tara and Oliver aren't exact clones of Mark, they still share quite a few similar traits to him. And more importantly, this share is good nature. There's just one more timid than him, and the other is much more energetic. And sure, while they're weaker, they ultimately do still share that good heart. The issue of cloning Anissa is there's a high likely chance they will just end up being like her. Not the exact same personality, but something maybe that could have been potentially worse. And sure, Mark would definitely be able to handle them. Hell, even Tara or Oliver could handle them on their own if they got a similar weakening to what they got. But that's too much of a risk and honestly just not worth it." That made a lot of sense in Robot's head. And Robot decided to agree to those demands. As 2 blood vials rose up from Robot's hand, "I'll be bringing my true body over here soon as well. My plan is to copy my brain over to the 2 clones." And Robot handed the 2 blood vials over to the Muller twins. One of the Muller twins in response said, "Seems you got your Wizard of Oz, Tin Man," before they got to work. And they were able to notice one of them was from Rexplode, who they were aware, after all, he was someone in the GDA system. But the Muller twins just figured that Rex likely gave away his DNA since Robot and Rex were previously on the same team, so that was probably the reason. But the second one, that one was a lot more interesting. There wasn't a match to this blood at all, not one that existed. The closest match was some random guy that was currently living in a cabin in the middle of the woods. but they couldn't recognize this at all, not to mention the fact they had this weird energy about it. As one of them asked, "Where did you get this?" And Robot said, "Even if I were to tell you, it would take far too long to actually explain, and in truth, I don't fully understand it myself, and that's why I want you guys to help me experiment on it." This led into an intrigue rising on both the Muller twins' eyes. After all, they had never seen blood or DNA like this. DNA that gave this type of energy, and they certainly wanted to find out more about it. Sure, they were still intrigued about their Viltrumite project they wanted to work on, but this now took much more precedence in their brain. And with that, they got to work. Robot decided to leave his drone here in order to assist them with any help they might need, while Transport headed over in order to transfer Robot's real body here as well. They knew it would be necessary pretty soon, so they might as well just get it here early. Mark, Tara, and Oliver all ended back at Project Anvil base. They had quite a few things to think about currently. After all, they had just made an alliance with Machine Head, the person who had gotten the closest to killing Mark through the usage of Battle Beast. As Mark looked over to Tara and Oliver, telling them to get some rest and prepare themselves, they would be attacking soon. He eventually arrived to his office, seeing that Robot had stopped by already nearby and was talking with the Muller twins right now. And while he was curious, he knew they worked together. He could ask about that later. Though he did send an order over to the Muller twins to see if they can figure out something in order to help with healing, in order to make the process go by faster, before he then got on a call with Cecil. As Cecil then said, "I already read the report you sent me about your deal with Machine Head. I don't like this, but it's our best chance to deal with the order, so go with it for now. You do have another order of importance though. I need you to make sure that Multipaul dies." But before the two of them could discuss who they were planning to send out, they suddenly got an alert. Before getting another and another, several of their kaiju alarms. In the ocean, a massive lobster monster rose out. Meanwhile, in different cities, centipedes were reported to be active, giant centipedes that came from the earth. Finally, there was also a report that the Lizard League had chosen to attack a facility. With most of the heroes busy in order to pick up the upgrades, the Lizard League saw this as their perfect opportunity to strike, striking a weapon facility in order to try and secure one of their nukes, though that one already had a report that they had people checking it out. Mark let out a sigh before saying, "All we'll need is Powerplex and some specialists. Seems quite a lot of people are choosing to make their move now." Cecil nodded in agreement before saying, "I wish you the best of luck. But before you go, I do have one more thing I need to tell you. In my discussion with Void, I found something out. In total, there are only 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites alive. I found out a few other things, but that can wait. I just felt this information would be helpful." And that made Invincible completely stop in his tracks. Not just was this information quite a big shock to him, he was a little bit surprised that Thaddeus never told him that. And he was going through the scenarios in his head of why didn't he tell him, ultimately coming to the most likely scenario just being Thaddeus likely didn't know himself. But then he asked himself, why did Void know this? And why didn't Void tell Thaddeus this, but he told Cecil this? However, before he could question it any further, he shook it off. He knew he needed to focus on that later. Cecil probably had answers, so he could focus on that later. He had work to do. Duplicate was currently sitting down at a rooftop. Someone very close to her past wanted to meet up with her here, and when she arrived, she'd see her sibling, Multipaul. Once Duplicate saw that, she immediately raised up her hand and created several clones right off the bat, until Multipaul told her to calm down. He's not here to fight, he's just here to talk. This slightly caught Duplicate off guard. She hadn't seen him in God knows how long, and yet now he wants to just talk with her? That confused her, but she told him to talk. Multipaul then took a seat. Despite all the clones that she had just made, he still seemed confident in himself, so confident he didn't choose to make any more clones. As he then said, "The world's about to go through some huge changes, sis, and I'm not just talking about the upgrades you guys just received from the GDA. If things go how I planned them to go, the world is not going to be the same." At first, I was satisfied for a while working under Mr. Liu, the main leader of the Order. He made me feel like I had a place that I could belong to, that I could become valuable to. But with what I've just done, I'm about to become the most formidable foe of this planet, and I'll be showing that off by killing your strongest. After I do that, I'm planning to eliminate Mr. Liu and take over the Order for myself. But you can join me, my sister. We can rule the underworld together. No longer have people over us that are exploiting us for our skills and abilities. Who knows, we might even be able to go to space one day and take things over from that point as well. Because the government doesn't value you. Your hero boyfriend doesn't value you either. And Duplicate glared as the clones she created massively increased, a total of 40 clones now present. They each were wearing enhancement gear. As one of them said, "No, not a chance." And Multipaul shrugged, as he then said, "Oh well, At least I can say I tried. And one of the duplicates grabbed Multipaul by the hand as they said, "What makes you think we're going to let you escape?" And a smirk rose onto Multipaul as he then said, "Sadly, that choice isn't yours to make." Which was when the rooftop broke as another Multipaul jumped out. But this one was different. It was wearing the same cybernetic enhancements that the Reaniman wore, but instead of its normal colors, it was purple and black, with Multipaul staring Duplicate dead in the eyes with glowing purple eyes before a helmet formed over them, sharing that same appearance, and hiding his mouth completely. Multipaul then said, "Even with the instructions the GDA left behind on their documents, it still took me quite a long while to figure out how to re-engineer it with the doctors that I was given. It took almost 6 hours just to turn one of me into a Reaniman, which if I time that correctly, I believe that is the time Invincible returned back to the planet. But you know what we can do with just one clone that's been turned into this. In fact, let me show you." In a quick burst of speed, Multipaul began to move. The Multipaul Reaniman was able to cut through 3 of the duplicate clones, as one of the clones attempted to punch it in the face, but it didn't work. He didn't even budge. Before a second Reanipaul rose out and punched straight through her stomach. And in a matter of moments, every single duplicate aside from one was eliminated. As the real Multipaul began to approach them, the one that was still human. "Relax, my sister, I have no intention to kill you, but I can't let you get in my way either. Though I also know this isn't the real you. If I know you, you have another clone somewhere in the Arctic, likely chilling in a cabin somewhere, making sure they are safe. I'd recommend calling your boyfriend Immortal over to you. That way he can avoid the slaughter. So I'll drop that message off to the real you." As one of the Reanipauls then had a blade rise out, passing the blade over to Multipaul before he sliced off Duplicate's head. He knew in order for them to get the information, the duplicate clones were going to have to die, and he knew this was not the real duplicate. As the real duplicate looked up, sitting down in her cabin, before calling for the Immortal to arrive, as Multipaul alongside the 2 other Reanipauls smirked, and he made a phone call, calling some people in order to clean up the bodies. Before Multipaul looked over at the 2 other Reanipauls and told them to head back to the warehouse. The 2 of them nodded before the 2 of them split up, going their separate ways. At the ocean, a massive beast was attacking. A sea monster looked like a conglomeration of several sea life. A depth dweller, one that was much larger. One that rivaled the Hail Mary in size, and was currently attacking a beach in North Carolina. Lunar, Kid 4, Aquarius, and Frobolt were all being dispersed in order to handle this monster. Meanwhile, in Wyoming, a giant centipede was attacking, one that came from the core of the Earth. In order to handle that, the heroes Solar, Adam Eve, Bolt, and Knockout were each being handled to deal with that creature. But those weren't the only places being attacked. Several other places had several weaker centipedes currently attacking. But these are the 2 strongest threats they currently had to deal with among the Kaiju crisis, so other heroes were being sent out to deal with those threats. Meanwhile, both Rexboat and Shrinking Ray were preparing to face off against the Lizard League. They were currently attacking a military base. During this time, the GDA successfully located where the warehouse that Multipaul was located was. Currently in total, there were 50 soldiers of the GDA, specialists each prepared in their invisible armor, with snipers prepared. High-powered snipers that had been recently upgraded in order to make sure the soldiers of the GDA could continue to fight alongside them. Both Invincible and Powerplex landed. In order for their plan to work, they were going to need to make a show, as Invincible called Machine Head to tell him that he was ready. Machine Head himself was currently in China, nearby the main base of the Order. With him was several criminals he had hired in order to assist him on this task. Battle Beast, Tethered Tyrant, Meg Maniac, Kursk, and Furnace, alongside several other hired guns. They just needed to wait for Mr. Liu to take the bait. We now return back to the warehouse. Multipaul was immediately alerted of the fact that they were outside. And he blinked. He was expecting himself to have a little bit more time before they realized he was here. But he smirked. He was a bit excited for this now. As he looked over to one of the doctors and told them, "Call Mr. Liu and tell him what's happening. I don't think I'll need the backup, but just in case." With Multipaul walking out from the warehouse, currently surprisingly still looking human. As Multipaul then said, "Invincible, Powerplex, what can I be doing for you 2 gentlemen today?" Invincible's hands began to glow green as he said, "You broke into GDA property and stole GDA technology. For that, you are under arrest." And Multipaul had a smirk rise on him before he began to laugh. "Really? That's all I'm being arrested for? I thought you would be more mad about me breaking out Doc Seismic from prison, or finding and letting out that thing that's currently attacking the ocean." And it suddenly clicked for Invincible. He hadn't even thought about it till now, just how the attacks were all happening at the same time. That was intentional. As Multipaul said, that was originally a diversion for me to be able to escape, make your hands so full you wouldn't want to go for me, but I can see that didn't work. Though either way, I am happy that you're here, because that means I get to kill you both in person. And one of the massive hangar doors began to open to the warehouse. As out from it, tens of reanimen began to jump down. Furthermore, from nearby buildings, reanimen were also jumping down, starting to surround both Mark and Powerplex. And while they looked like reanimen, they were clearly Multipaul, and there were so many of them. Before Multipaul jumped up high, landing on the rooftop, as he then said, I was only really able to make one reanimen, originally, but I can clone myself quite fast. And it wasn't something I thought about for a while, but whenever I clone myself, I also clone whatever I'm wearing. Whether it's the clothing I'm wearing or items I'm holding, they get cloned. So let's just say, I had a lot of fun with this. And I have no one to thank but you for this, Invincible. You were the one that made the GDA improve so heavily and made the criminal underworld shake in its boots. You were the one who gave me the inspiration to infiltrate your base, to figure out just how you got that strong. You should have looked past the Viltrumites that were on your doorstep and instead looked at the very species you wanted to advance, because now that advancement is going to be used against you. But still, like I said, I must thank you for paving the way for me. Invincible then put his fists together as he said, do you think this really matters? You can put as many reanimen as you want against me, it won't make a difference. All of them are going to go down. And Multipaul smirked as he said, alright Invincible, let's test how true that theory is. And all the Multipaul reanimen began to rush at the two of them at once. Sparks rising from Powerplex's hand, while at the same time the green glow began to rise from Invincible as well, as Invincible wished Powerplex the best of luck, before the two of them rushed into their own wave of reanimen. Invincible clashed fists with one of the reanipols immediately, and Invincible blinked a slight bit in surprise. When he completely overpowered the reanipol and sent them flying into several others, he was surprised that they were actually a little bit stronger than normal reanimen, though he figured the likely reason was because their base body was a lot stronger. He knew Multipaul was at least peak human, if not far greater, so stacking that with reanimen enhancements and it makes something much greater. Still, that punch was more than enough to completely shatter that reanipol's arm and send them flying through 3 more reanimen. But they were quickly replaced, as 3 more attempted to jump in Invincible at the same time. But his hands glowed green as he lifted up both of them and fired a massive laser out towards all of them, killing not just the 3 reanipols, but also several reanipols behind them. 20 of them killed in a single blow. But those reanimen were quickly replaced. More than that, 4 saw their chance, as 4 of them landed blows on Mark's back. And Mark groaned a slight bit before he quickly moved to counter, moving his arms in order to clap behind himself and sending all 4 of them flying backwards with a shockwave, knocking over 4 more reanimen each on top of that. As one of the reanipols said, look up Invincible, and once he did he could see tens of reanipols rocketing down towards him, as he lifted up his hand, starting to rapid fire lasers towards each of them. 8 more reanipols saw their chance, as they each went for one side of Invincible's body. Our Invincible saw that coming as he jumped into the air before flipping over, spinning in the air and using his hands like blades with the speed he was moving at, decapitating 8 of them at once as 3 of them jumped high into the air and kicked Mark straight in the gut, interrupting Mark's movements while they landed on the ground. And as Invincible was being sent backwards from that kick, 4 more reanipols jumped up and spiked him straight into the ground. And as 3 attempted to rush him at once, he clapped again, sending those 3 flying backwards. As Invincible thought to himself, this will be a lot harder than I thought. The damage they are doing to me is minor, but it will build up over time. I'll definitely have to increase my range, but that risks potentially destroying several areas around us. Sending a message over to 3 of the specialists, telling them to try and find where the other reanipols were located. He had a feeling Multipaul still had some hidden just in case. And the reanipol corpses that were on the ground were quickly overshadowed by even more reanipols taking their place. Flying also wasn't an option. Thanks to the reanimen enhancements, they would be able to jump to catch up to him. But he didn't have much more time to think, as 4 more reanimen jumped towards him, each of them trying to slam their fists into him at once. While Invincible was about to try and fly away, 5 more reanimen from behind grabbed him, making sure he'd be forced to take those hits. And he grunted. Those hits were hard. Now, of course, if it was just 1 reanimen, he'd be able to take the blows easily. But 5 reanimen at once hitting him would definitely hurt him even a little. But Invincible then spun, forcing the reanimen off of him and slamming them right into the reanimen that just attacked him. Under normal circumstances, he knew he could just overpower the amount of reanimen coming, but there was just so many. No, it wasn't just that there were so many, it was that Multipaul could continue to make more and more. And when Invincible stopped spinning, one of them rushed towards him and attempted to punch him straight in the face, but Invincible ducked underneath that punch and uppercutted that reaniman straight in the jaw. But 3 more Reanipauls took their chance, as they punched him in the back as well as his 2 sides. But before the 3 of them could pull away, Mark was able to decapitate all 3 of the reanimen that just attacked him. As Multipaul then said, "It doesn't really matter how strong you are against someone like me, not with all of these enhancements. It's only a matter of how long will it take for me to kill you." And the Invincible warsuit began to glow green, as he lifted up both of his hands and began to rapidly spin, firing out lasers all throughout different directions, looking like a ball of green and black, as reanimen were culled through by the dozens. But he saw they were continuing to jump at him, almost like they were jumping towards their death. But it was from all directions, and they were making their way. Invincible could only cut through them so fast. And right as one of them was about to punch Mark in the face, a bullet went right through that Reanipaul's head, stopping its movements dead in its tracks. As several gunshots could be heard, the backup specialists that they had brought were now active, uncloaking themselves fully to begin firing. And Multipaul blinked as he looked over to the direction where the shots were coming from, smirking a little bit as he said, I should have expected that you two didn't come here alone." Multipaul was also able to hear on the other side of the warehouse the sparks increasing. Powerplex wasn't anywhere near as physically strong in comparison to Mark, so while he was able to kill the Reanipauls, it was at a much slower rate. However, up until this point, unlike Mark who'd been fighting offensively, Powerplex had mainly been fighting defensively, taking several blows, more blows than he had ever taken in his life, even reaching a point where he surpassed the level he was at after taking a blow from Mark during their fight against Anissa. But all of this was intentional. With the new upgrades to his gear, he wasn't sure how far he could go anymore, as a massive pack of reanimen all tried to jump onto him at once and he punched the ground, releasing a massive wave of lightning all around him, vaporizing 50 Reanipauls all at once. And Multipaul tapped his chin. Now he was intrigued. He didn't actually know that much about Powerplex in comparison to Invincible. Sure, the members of Project Anvil were a threat, he didn't consider them too powerful. So Multipaul decided to make a call over to Mr. Liu. "I'm gonna need some backup, boss. So get over here as fast as you can." Before hanging up, as he began to redirect some reanimen away, directed them over towards the GDA specialists. At the same time, he continued his effort on both Invincible and Powerplex. He was a makeshift army. Thanks to Mark's super hearing, he was able to pick up on what Multipaul had just said, as he muted his armor before telling Machine Head, "Mr. Liu is coming over now. Now is your time to attack." The assassins all heard the signal. Before they could act, Machine Head raised up his hand, telling them, "Not yet. Wait until Mr. Liu is no longer in the premise. No need to be too hasty." Battle Beast was starting to twitch a little bit. He was getting antsy. He really wanted to fight. After all, he could hear all of the battle that Mark had going on, and that was starting to rile him up. But at the same time, he knew he had to wait. As Machine Head lifted up his hands, showing 5 fingers, then going down to 4, then 3, then 2, as he said, "Now." Viso teleporting Machine Head, Titan, as well as Kursk directly into Mr. Liu's office. The 2 guards saw them. Before they could do anything, Kursk released a massive bolt of lightning towards the both of them, completely knocking them out in a single move. And they could hear the chaos going on outside. Gunshots being fired, the roar of Battle Beast, lava being launched all over the place, people being slammed into buildings. As Machine Head then got a pistol from Isotope. As Machine Head then said, "Gotta say, thanks Titan. It's fun being on your side, rather than your rock-brained self being against me." Before he shot Mr. Liu, killing him and stopping the dragon from even getting close to reaching America. "Teleport that body to the safe spot, just in case there can be anyone who actually doubts us, but I don't think there will be." As Machine Head opened the window, watching the carnage going on outside. "You know, if I did actually have teeth or a face, I would be smiling right now." But he did activate his headset as he told them, "Don't kill everybody here, by the way. If there are people who are surrendering, let's keep them. I'm about to become the new leader of the Order, so might as well still have some men left." Multipaul would have reconnected back to the headset. He knew he should be getting an update any time now from Mr. Liu on how long it should take for him to get here, but he wasn't getting anything, as he realized he might not be coming anytime soon. And Multipaul's eye twitched a little bit, realizing everything in that moment. Machine Head was likely behind this. But as he realized, that realization slowly turned to a wide smile. This wasn't going to be a setback. If anything, this benefited him. After all, he was planning to kill him anyways. But now what he was more curious at was the specialist guns. After all, he could tell those were no standard model of guns. It was a model of gun he had never seen before. So he sends an order to his reaniman: don't destroy their bodies and guns, but do kill the specialists. As all the specialists would each see 3 reanimen coming for each of them. Other than, of course, the 3 that still remained cloaked that were searching for other reanipals. The closest one yelled out to run, but he wasn't so lucky, as all 3 of them landed punches on their body, launching them back quite hard, and right before they could hit a wall, they were teleported out the way, teleporting back to base. The first man got lucky. The GDA was already able to see that he had no chance of survival, so they already prepared the teleporter to move them out the way. Sadly, the next 6 weren't so lucky. In one quick movement, 6 were killed. The sound of bodies making collisions to wall could be heard all throughout the area, as the other 40 specialists that were still uncloaked and the 3 specialists were forced to watch their comrades die. And Invincible heard the sound. He heard the sound of their bones crunching, of their bodies hitting the wall. But mid-movement, 3 more reanipals rose out from each of the reanipals that had just attacked. And like that, another 9 were executed right on the spot by the reanipals, the others just barely moving out of the way. The reanipals striking Mark took this chance, as they each rushed towards Mark, seeing him completely distracted. But Mark was twitching. Those were his soldiers, his men. And he had brought them here to their deaths. He had brought those men to die, men who had worked for him, men who he had gotten to know well. As in a burst of rage, he flew right past the reanipals, bursting through several of them in the process. He felt even stronger now. But more than that, rage was coursing through him. Rage that was even further than what he was feeling during his battle against Battle Beast, as he began to rush for his men. But the reanipals saw this as their chance, as several of them began to jump on Mark to try and repeatedly land blows onto his body. But he didn't care, forcing them off of his body before grabbing them by the hand and beginning to throw them at each of the reanipals attacking his men, and then rapidly spinning around as he fired green lasers, aiming mainly for the reanipals attacking his men. I will not allow any of my soldiers here to die. Both Powerplex and his soldiers saw this display of care he had for his men. Furthermore, the bodies of the soldiers who had just been killed were also teleported out the way, being teleported back to base. And one of the specialists was rather quick to act, as their gun began to glow red. Their new guns were similar to the model of lasers that were put into Mark's previous suit. And now they were making it go on overdrive, as they began to rapid fire, executing even more reanipals. In particular, executing the ones that were trying to rush at Invincible from behind and taking advantage of his rage. And the other Project Anvil specialists followed, starting to jump backwards and firing on rapid fire. Even though there were only 32 of them firing, they now had a fire in their stomach, one in order to back up their leader no matter what. And at that same time, Powerplex was also in a similar state, firing lightning under his feet, now being back-to-back with Mark. As both of them lifted up their hand, lightning stronger than anything Powerplex had ever created before, as well as lasers being fired all across the place, executing reanipals by the 30s alongside all the GDA specialists fighting alongside them. But the main, still human Multipaul smirked as he said, "It doesn't matter how mad you get or how powerful you get, dumbass. I am my own army. You can kill as many as you want, I'll always just have more." As Multipaul began to push himself, and it looked like an entire swarm, an entire nest of Multipauls were surrounding them from all angles. And he said, "Though I must thank you, Invincible, Powerplex, and your fellow Project Anvil soldiers, I've never had to push myself to making this many clones before." Seeing this, Invincible swapped from firing lasers, instead turning that off and began to clap his hands rapidly. He knew his shockwaves had much wider range of effects in comparison to his lasers, even though they were significantly less potent. But since they were so huddled together in the sky, he was able to hit several of them, even as a result crushing some of the multi-reanimen that were on the ground. There were so many reanipals to the point where the ground couldn't be seen anymore. But Mark was starting to get a little bit tired, same with Powerplex. One of them almost actually reached Mark until they were sniped out of the air by one of the GDA specialists, the quick acting one that had acted earlier. Invincible gave a quick thanks before they then fired out another laser beam, doing that in order to cover that specialist. But they were starting to get completely overrun, and it was only getting exponentially worse by the second. A few of the specials were forced to be teleporting away, dropping a grenade on where they originally were, stunning some of them in the process. While other specialists weren't so lucky, they didn't get away without being injured, and some of them were even killed. Even worse, 5 of the reanipals were able to jump onto Mark, while 5 more jumped onto Powerplex and slammed them into the ground. The specialists were quickly being shred down, teleported away, or injured and teleported away, closing in, now being on the single-digit mark. As one of the reanipals got close to the specialist, and they attempted to punch them in the face, but the specialist slid underneath, taking out a blade, slicing off their arm before jumping over their body and slicing off their head. The specialists then landed on their feet before 5 more Reanipols came rushing towards them. But a moment before they could be reached, they were teleported out the way, teleporting back to Project Anvil base. As several blows were being landed on Mark, punch after punch, and while he was able to push some of the Reanipols off of him, another quickly took its place. Similar effects were happening to Powerplex as well. Blow after blow was landed, before Mark's entire body began to glow green and he fired out a massive laser, making a green beacon of light that was able to shred and evaporate through hundreds of reanimen by the second. But that laser was not able to last for too long, as more Reanipols began to jump down and take its place. Mark was being forced to be able to do nothing but take the blows, having several of them land on him at once and bruise his body, all the while he watched the life signatures of his comrades go down. Some were being teleported out the way, but some were dying. Mark had lost before to Battle Beast, but that was different. In this situation, this was against somebody who was killing people that he was responsible for, people that he wouldn't be able to avenge. And unlike Battle Beast, there was no one who'd be able to save him right now. And the realization was hitting him. This was all his fault. He had wanted everybody on the planet to be strong together. He had wanted to make sure humanity was strong. But now that was being turned against him, not of his own choice, but because a villain decided to use what he was doing for his own gain. But Powerplex was also thinking, this was where he was going to die. His family, everybody he cared about. He was never going to see them again. And he looked over to Invincible, or at least where Invincible was detected to be thanks to his armor. A friend he had grown with for the GDA was going to be where both of them died. Mark didn't have a way out of this. If he teleported, it would have teleported the Multipauls on top of him with him. And while Mark was angry and being able to kill them by the tens, it didn't really matter, because more and more of them were taking their place. Every time he landed one blow and killed 10 of them were able to land blows on him. And the damage was building up. As he heard the sound of one of his ribs cracking, a bone had broken. As Multipaul smirked and he said, "I think I'm the first human to ever do damage to you, aren't I? You should have stayed in space, Viltrumite." But then they both heard sparks begin to increase in sound, as a massive burst of lightning forced all of the Reanipols off of him. Powerplex rose up, his body completely surrounded in lightning. The only thing that looked human about him was his 2 white eyes remaining, the white eyes from the suit. They could also hear the sound of another rib breaking, and another. The Reanipols were trying their best to make sure that Mark wouldn't get up. As Powerplex looked over to his comrade, in a burst of speed, he flew right past them, flying through them and destroying several of them in the process and picking up Mark. Before 2 of them floated in the air, as Powerplex told Mark that he has it from here. And Mark said, "Make sure that son of a bitch dies," before passing out from the pain, as Mark was teleported away. And all of the Reanipols stared up at Powerplex at once. At the same time, the main Multipaul said, "I think I figured out your powers now. Anytime you take damage, you get stronger and are able to produce more and more electricity, which makes you the perfect opponent for me in theory. However, that has one flaw to it. That just makes us an infinite loop. Because you don't hold on to that power forever. That power is on a time limit. If it wasn't, you would have been able to break out far easier. And so long as I outnumber you, you won't be able to kill me." Powerplex then sent a message over to all the GDA specialists that weren't cloaked on the battlefield, telling them to teleport back to base. And they looked over to Powerplex for a moment, giving him a concerned look, but at the same time nodding, as they each teleported away, leaving Powerplex to fight against Reanipol seemingly alone. As Powerplex then said, "You're right about that, but I'm not going to lose to you." And the swarm of Reanipols then all jumped towards him, as he said, "I beg to differ." Then Powerplex finally got the signal from the GDA specialists that were cloaked. They pinged the locations of each of the Reanipols nearby, the ones that were generating more of them in order to fight. And once he got that, he smiled, as he released a large wave of lightning, one in order to knock away all of the Reanipols from himself before he began to fly higher and higher into the air. The 3 cloaked GDA specialists knew what he was about to do, so they quickly teleported out the way, as Powerplex focused the lightning around his body, expanding it further and further. And the other Reanipols attempted to jump up towards him in order to reach him, but the ones that were knocked away by the electricity generating from his body. Before he sent the massive thunderbolt down, a bolt of lightning so bright and massive that even bystanders nearby were able to see it. One that was so massive inside that it not just destroyed the entire warehouse around them, but several, tens of buildings nearby. Each of them were abandoned, before Powerplex began to fall to the ground, completely out of energy. However, before he could make contact with the ground, he was teleported back to Project Anvil base. The moment he saw they were in a safe place, Powerplex allowed himself to pass out, as he apologized to the GDA soldiers he couldn't save on that day, hoping they could all rest in peace now that they had been avenged.